Sign it, or security will escort you out. Mr. Holt slid the paper across the glass table with 2 fingers, like it was something dirty. The conference room was cold. Not from the air conditioning, from the silence. 8 people sat around that table, and not one of them moved. I looked at the document. At the top, in bold letters, employee write-up and final warning. Below that, my name, Daniel O'Say. And below that, a list of accusations I was reading for the first time. Failed to notify client of delivery changes. Mishandled critical communication. Caused the termination of the Aldwell account. The Aldwell account. 3 years of work. One of the biggest contracts the company had ever signed. And now it had a name on it, mine. My hands weren't shaking because I was scared. They were shaking because something inside me was trying very hard not to speak. Across the room, Risa sat with her arms folded and her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. She hadn't looked at me since I walked in. I picked up the pen. And then the man at the far end of the table leaned forward. Before he signs, he said quietly, can we review the email chain? The room shifted. Mr. Holt looked up from his papers. His expression didn't change exactly, but something behind his eyes did, a small tightening, like someone had just pulled a thread. Excuse me, he said. The man who had spoken was sitting slightly apart from the others. I had noticed him when I walked in but assumed he was someone from legal or compliance, the kind of person who sat in meetings but rarely spoke. He was older, maybe late 60s, with a plain grey tie and reading glasses resting on the table in front of him. He hadn't introduced himself. The email chain, he repeated calmly. The full thread. Between your team and the Aldwell client. Before Mr. O'Say signs anything, I'd like to see it. Mr. Holt cleared his throat. That's already been reviewed internally. Then it should be easy to pull up. Another silence. Different from the first one. Heavier. I looked at the man. He wasn't looking at Holt. He was looking at me. And his expression was steady in a way that felt deliberate, like he was trying to tell me something without words. I set the pen down. My name is Daniel, I said to no one in particular. And I signed anyway. Gasps, small but real, moved around the table like a wave. People always said I was too quiet for this office. Not shy, quiet. There's a difference. I noticed things. I remembered things. I just didn't feel the need to announce them. I had been at Crane and Poole for 4 years. Started as a junior account coordinator straight out of university. Worked my way to senior coordinator without any fanfare, without any formal promotion meeting, really without much acknowledgement at all. I filled gaps. That was what I did. When a deadline crept up on someone, I stayed late. When a file went missing, I found it. When a client email came in after hours and nobody was around, I answered it. The office was the kind of place that ran on invisible labor. Everybody knew it. Nobody said it. My desk sat in the middle of the open floor, surrounded by people who talked louder than me and dressed better than me. I didn't mind. I had my work. I had my routines. I also had Risa. We weren't close, exactly. But we worked near each other, and over time that proximity had become something like friendship. She laughed easily. She remembered birthdays. She made the long afternoons feel shorter. That morning, the morning before everything unraveled, she had been avoiding my eyes. I had noticed. I just didn't understand it yet. It started 3 weeks before the write-up, on a Thursday evening. Risa appeared at my desk at 6:15 p.m. Most people had already gone home. The overhead lights had switched to their dim after-hour setting, and the office had that particular hollow quality it got when it was almost empty. Danny. She only called me that when she needed something. I'm in trouble. She had been working on a delivery schedule update for Aldwell, a routine document that needed to go out by end of business. Aldwell was a demanding client. They had specific formatting requirements, specific contact protocols. Risa had been managing their account for 3 months, but she still hadn't fully learned their system. She'd gotten confused. Mixed up 2 contact addresses. Sent the draft to the wrong internal thread. Now she had 40 minutes, a formatting error she didn't know how to fix, and a creeping panic behind her eyes. Please, she said. You know Aldwell's template better than anyone. I looked at my own screen. I had a report due the next morning, one I hadn't finished. I looked back at Risa. Pull up your file, I said. Her shoulders dropped with relief. I won't forget this, Danny. I promise. I believed her. I shouldn't have. That wasn't the only time. Looking back now, I can see the pattern clearly. At the time, I just thought I was being helpful. That's what I had always told myself. Being helpful wasn't a weakness. It was just who I was. But there was Kyle, who asked me to cover his client calls every time he had a personal appointment. I covered 6 of them in 2 months. He got credit for every single one. There was Priya, who sent me her monthly reports to proofread because, she said, I caught things other people missed. I proofread 11 reports. My name appeared on none of them. There was Marcus, who asked me to walk him through a client escalation procedure I had developed myself. He presented it to Mr. Holt as his own idea 2 weeks later. I didn't report any of it. I didn't confront any of them. I told myself it was fine. That the work was what mattered, not the credit. The truth was something I wasn't ready to say yet, that I had trained the people around me to take from me because I had never once shown them there was a cost. Someone had been watching all of this. I didn't know it then. But he had been paying close attention. I first saw the old man on a Tuesday in October. He was standing near the reception area when I came in from lunch, holding a folder of documents and looking slightly lost. The receptionist, Amora, was on a call and hadn't noticed him. 2 colleagues walked past him without a glance. I don't know why I stopped. I almost didn't. I had a meeting in 12 minutes and a coffee going cold in my hand. But something about the way he stood, patient, not frustrated, just quietly waiting, made me slow down. Can I help you find something? I asked. He looked up. His eyes were sharp and dark, the kind that had seen a lot and given away very little. I have a meeting on the 4th floor, he said. But I seem to have the wrong visitor pass. The name on it doesn't match the department. I took the pass, checked it, went to the front desk, sorted it out with Amora when she finished her call. Took about 8 minutes. I was late to my own meeting. When I handed him the corrected pass, he studied me for a moment. Not many people would have stopped, he said. Somebody had to, I said, and headed for the elevator. Thank you, Mr. Daniel, I said without turning around. Daniel Osei. He came back 4 days later. I was eating at my desk when I looked up and saw him near the corridor that led to the meeting rooms, standing the same quiet way he had stood near reception. This time he wasn't lost. He was looking directly at me. I raised a hand. He walked over and sat in the empty chair beside my desk like it was the most natural thing in the world. You work here full-time? He asked. 4 years, I said. He nodded. Do you enjoy it? It was a strange question. Most people asked what you did, not how you felt about it. Some days more than others, I answered. He smiled at that. Then he asked the question I would think about for weeks. In a place like this, he said, voice low, do people take responsibility for their mistakes? Or do they find ways around it? I paused with my sandwich halfway to my mouth. It wasn't a general question. The way he asked it, careful, direct, watching my face, felt specific. Like he already had an answer and wanted to know if mine matched. Honestly, I said. Please, he said. I told him the truth. The night everything broke was a Wednesday, 11 days before the write-up. I was the last one in the office. That was normal. The floor was dark except for my corner and the faint blue glow of the server room at the end of the hall. I was finishing a report when a notification appeared on the shared project portal. An email had been sent from the Aldwell communication thread, the one Risa managed. Sent at 9:47 p.m. I opened it. Risa's name was in the sender field. My stomach sank. The email had gone to the wrong Aldwell contact, an older address inactive for 2 months. The message announced a delivery window change. A change that Aldwell had specifically required 48 hours notice for, through the correct channel. Risa wasn't there. There was no way to unsend it. I drafted a follow-up from the general account address, flagging the error and providing corrected information. I documented everything in the portal notes and marked the thread urgent. I told myself Risa would see it in the morning and we'd sort it out together. She did see it in the morning. She just didn't tell anyone it was hers. I felt the change before I could name it. Monday morning, 4 days after the email error, I walked in and something was different. Not loud. Not obvious. Just off. Like the temperature in a room that's dropped 2 degrees while you weren't paying attention. People who usually said good morning didn't. Kyle, who stopped by my desk every day to talk about football scores, walked straight to his own seat without a glance. Priya, who I had proofread a report for just the previous week, suddenly found reasons to be busy every time I was nearby. I told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't. By midday, I had caught 3 separate conversations that stopped the moment I came within earshot. Once could be coincidence. Twice was bad luck. 3 times was a message. Something was moving through the office. Something that had my name on it. I went to Risa's desk around 2 o'clock. She was at her computer, typing quickly. "Hey," I said. "Is everything okay with the Aldwell thread? I flagged it last week." "I handled it," she said, not looking up. "Did you let Holt know what happened?" A pause. A fraction too long. "It's taken care of, Danny." She still hadn't looked at me. I walked back to my desk knowing, with cold certainty, that something had already been decided, and I hadn't been consulted. Mr. Holt called me into his office on Wednesday morning. He didn't ask me to sit down. That was the first sign. He just turned from his window, looked at me, and said, "We need to talk about the Aldwell communication failure." I kept my voice level. I flagged that error the same night it happened. There are portal notes with timestamps. "The email came from the account responsible to you." "No," I said carefully. "The email came from Risa's project thread. I'm not assigned to Aldwell." He opened a folder on his desk and slid a printed page toward me. It was a screenshot of the portal. My follow-up message. My name. My timestamp. "You were the last person to touch that thread," he said. "Because I was trying to fix it." The client received a confusing sequence of messages. They escalated. "Now we're in damage control." He closed the folder. "This happened on your watch, Daniel." I looked past Holt, through his glass office wall. The floor was visible from where I stood. I could see desks, computer screens, the water cooler by the far wall. And Risa, standing near the printer. Not looking this way. I opened my mouth. I thought about what would happen if I said her name. I closed it again. I had about 4 seconds to make a decision. If I said Risa's name, if I told Holt the email had come from her account, that I had only touched the thread to fix her error, there would be an investigation. Her login credentials would be checked. Her original message would surface. The truth would come out. And Risa would lose her job. I knew she was on probation. She had told me herself a month earlier that Holt had given her one more chance after a client complaint the previous quarter. One more documented error and she was finished. She had a daughter. 7 years old. I had seen the photo on her desk, gap-toothed smile, school uniform, the kind of picture that makes a place feel human. None of that was my responsibility. I knew that. But knowing something and feeling it are 2 different things. I thought about the photo. I thought about Risa saying "I won't forget this, Danny." I thought about how I had already fixed the error. How maybe this would stay small. I said nothing. Holt nodded like my silence was confirmation. "We'll be moving forward with a formal review," he said. I walked out carrying why wasn't mine. He was waiting near the elevator bay that afternoon. I almost walked past him. My mind was elsewhere, running through worst-case outcomes, wondering if I had just made the worst decision of my life. But I saw him. The same grey tie. The same steady eyes. "You look like someone carrying weight that isn't theirs," he said. I stopped walking. There was something in the way he said it, not a question, not a comfort. More like an observation from someone who recognized the posture of a person holding up a ceiling. I tried to smile. It didn't quite work. "Just a busy week," I said. He studied my face. Sometimes doing the right thing and doing the kind thing aren't the same decision. I didn't know what to say. He hadn't pushed or asked anything. He just stood there with the kind of stillness that doesn't demand anything from you, and somehow that made it harder to hold myself together than any interrogation would have. "I'll be fine," I said finally. "I believe you," he said. "I hope you believe it too." He walked toward the stairwell. I watched him go, trying to understand why everything he said felt like it meant 2 things at once. He stopped coming after that. I looked for him in the quiet way you look for something you didn't realize you depended on until it was gone. Every morning through reception. Every afternoon near the elevator bay. He wasn't there. No sign of him. No name I could ask about. I assumed he was a consultant or vendor with recurring meetings upstairs, the kind of person who comes and goes without announcement. I told myself it didn't matter. Then, On the same Friday he stopped appearing, the situation with Aldwell escalated. An email arrived in the company's main account, addressed to Holt directly, from the Aldwell account manager. He wrote that the communication confusion had caused a scheduling error. A delivery had been missed. There were downstream consequences. He wanted to know who was responsible. Holt forwarded it to HR within the hour. By end of day I had a calendar invite for the following Wednesday. Subject line, Employee Performance and Conduct Discussion, DO. Something told me the timing wasn't a coincidence. The old man disappearing. The escalation arriving. Both on the same day. I just couldn't see the connection yet. The week between the invite and the meeting was the loneliest I had spent in that office. Nobody shouted. Nobody accused me openly. It was all quiet, the kind of quiet that has intent behind it. People who used to drop files on my desk now sent short, professional emails instead. The kind that created paper trails. Carl stopped borrowing my notes. Priya stopped sending reports. Marcus walked past me in the kitchen without speaking 3 days in a row. And Risa got busier. On Tuesday, Holt sent a team email announcing she would lead the Aldwell account recovery. He praised her initiative and her willingness to take ownership during a difficult period. Take ownership. I read that phrase 3 times. I had given her the chance to own it. She had handed it back to me with my name on the wrapping. I didn't respond beyond a polite acknowledgement. That night, I sat at my desk after hours and opened the portal for the first time since the investigation began. I checked the Aldwell thread carefully. Every message. Every timestamp. Everything I needed was still there. If anyone looked, really looked, it was all there. The formal write-up was prepared on Tuesday afternoon. I found out through an email from HR, a woman named Tricia, who I had spoken to maybe twice in 4 years. She sent me a document titled Notice of Formal Disciplinary Action and asked me to review it before the Wednesday meeting. I read it in my car during lunch. It was detailed. Methodical. It laid out the Aldwell communication failure as a single event caused by a single person, me. It cited my follow-up message on the portal as evidence that I was aware of the issue and failed to escalate it appropriately. It did not mention that the original error email had come from a different account entirely. There would be no hearing before the meeting. No panel. No opportunity to submit evidence in advance. Just me, Mr. Holt, 2 HR representatives, and the document waiting for my signature. I thought about calling a lawyer. I thought about writing a rebuttal. I spent 2 hours drafting a detailed timeline with screenshots, timestamps, and portal logs, everything that showed exactly what had happened, in order, with proof. Then I folded it. Put it in my bag. And I went back inside. I still hadn't decided whether I would use it. But I was going to walk into that room prepared, not fighting yet, but ready. The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on Tuesday. I was still awake, I hadn't been sleeping well, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up expecting a news alert or a spam message. Instead, it was a notification from my work account. One new message. The sender field was blank. Not anonymous, not a system address, just empty, like whatever server it had come from hadn't bothered to label itself. The body of the email contained one sentence. Be present at tomorrow's client review. A friend. I sat up. I read it 4 more times. Then I opened my laptop and checked the meeting invite I had received from HR. It was still there, same time, same room, same subject line. Employee Performance and Conduct Discussion. No mention of a client review. No mention of the Aldwell account manager attending. No additional attendees listed. I checked the portal. Nothing new. I checked the company calendar. There was a separate meeting scheduled for the same room, 30 minutes before mine. Subject, Aldwell account review, internal and external stakeholders. External stakeholders. That meant the client was coming in. The blank email. The meeting. The timing. My heart was beating differently now. I set my phone down, stared at the ceiling, and tried to understand what was being arranged. The next morning, I arrived early. I was at my desk by 7:30. The floor was quiet, just the hum of lights and the distant sound of a cleaning cart. I was reviewing my printed timeline when Marcus appeared beside me. He hadn't sought me out in over a week. He leaned close and spoke quietly. The client is already upstairs. Arrived at 7. Holt's been with them since. Okay, I said. They specifically asked for you, Danny. HR sent a revised invite, Did you see it? I opened my email. The subject line now read, Aldwell account review and personnel discussion, all relevant parties. My name had been added. So had one other, appearing below all the rest, added at 6:52 a.m., with no title or department beside it. W. Aldwell. I sat back. Not with fear. With something closer to the feeling you get when you've been walking in the dark for a long time and someone finally turns on a light. Why would they ask for me specifically? I said. Marcus looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from him in weeks, something between guilt and cautious hope. I don't know, he said. But you should go up there. The conference room on the 4th floor was different from where Holt had first tried to get me to sign the write-up. That one was cold and functional. This was the client-facing room, longer table, better chairs, windows looking out over the street. The room they used when they wanted to impress someone. It was already full when I walked in. Holt sat at the near end, flanked by 2 HR representatives and Brenda, our department head, someone I respected but who had stayed carefully distant throughout all of this. Risa sat halfway down the table, posture rigid. 2 people I didn't recognize sat across from her. And at the far end, in the seat that usually meant the most authority, sat the old man. Same grey tie. He looked exactly as he had every time I had seen him, near reception, near the elevator, beside my desk. Calm. Contained. Like someone who had all the time in the world. He met my eyes when I walked in and gave me the smallest, most deliberate nod I had ever seen. Good, said the representative to Holt's left. Now we can begin. Let's start with the full email chain on the screen. The screen at the end of the room flickered on. A technician stepped forward and connected a laptop to the projector. He pulled up the Aldwell communication portal, not our company's version, but Aldwell's own internal system. It logged every message with its own timestamps and metadata. The thread appeared in chronological order. I watched the room as people read. Holt's eyes moved steadily down the screen. The HR representatives made notes. Brenda leaned forward like someone straining to read from too far away. The technician scrolled to the message sent at 9:47 p.m. on that Wednesday night. The sender field was clear. Risa's name. Her account. Her login credentials, attached automatically by the system. Not mine. The room murmured, not loudly, just the soft sound of understanding arriving somewhere it hadn't been before. Holt turned his head slowly and looked at Risa. All the composure she had maintained through the past 2 weeks, the steady voice, the professional distance, showed its first visible crack. This doesn't reflect, she started. Keep scrolling, said the man at the far end of the table. The technician scrolled. My follow-up message appeared. My name. My timestamp. 2 hours and 14 minutes after Risa's error. Labeled clearly as a correction. The murmur in the room grew. They kept going. The Aldwell technician had brought more than just the email thread. He had also brought deleted drafts, messages started and discarded in the portal over the previous 3 weeks. Files that disappear from normal view but stay in system backups. The first was a draft written from Risa's account 2 days after the error. An unsent message that began, I need to let you know that the confusion around the delivery window was caused by me. 2 sentences. Deleted without being sent. The second was another draft, written the following day. Similar opening. Also deleted. The third was a message to Holt, from Risa's account, never sent, containing a clear and complete account of everything. The wrong address, the late hour, the mistake she had made. 3 times she had started to tell the truth. 3 times she had stopped. I didn't feel the anger I expected. What I felt was something quieter, the specific sadness of watching someone make the same wrong turn over and over because they were too frightened to take the other road. Risa was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles pale. The man at the far end of the room hadn't moved. But his eyes were on me, not on the screen. He was watching how I was taking it. Bart turned away from the screen and looked at me directly. Mr. Osei, I have one question for you. The room was completely still. You had evidence from the beginning that placed this error on someone else. Portal notes. Timestamps. Logs. All of it. Why didn't you use it? Why didn't you defend yourself? I had rehearsed different versions of this answer at night, lying in the dark. But standing there, with everyone watching, none of the rehearsed versions felt right. So I said the truth. Because the person who made the mistake needed her job more than I needed to be right. The silence that followed was different from anything the room had held before. Brenda stopped writing. Bart leaned back and studied me. Holt looked down at the table. And Risa let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside her for 2 weeks. Her head dropped forward. Her shoulders shook once. Then she covered her face with both hands. The man at the far end of the table finally moved. He sat forward, placed his hands flat on the table, and spoke for only the second time since I had walked in. "Thank you, Daniel," he said quietly. "That's all I needed to hear." Bart stood up. He walked around the table slowly, the way someone walks when they're giving a room time to understand what's coming. He stopped beside the old man's chair, and in that moment, with both of them side by side, I finally understood. They knew each other. Not as client and company. As something closer. Older. The old man reached into his jacket and placed a business card on the table facing me. W. Aldwell. Founder and Chairman, Aldwell Group. The Aldwell account. The client. The name at the bottom of every contract our company had spent 3 years building. He had been here the whole time. Walking through our lobby. Sitting near reception. Standing by the elevator on Tuesday afternoons. Watching how people treated strangers with no obvious power. Watching how people treated each other when no one important seemed to be looking. He hadn't been testing the company's systems or processes. He had been testing its people. And somewhere between the visitor pass and the lobby and that question about responsibility and the weight behind my eyes in the corridor, he had decided I was someone worth watching closely. "You came here yourself," I said quietly. "I always do," he said. "Before I sign anything new." What happened next moved quickly, the way things do when the truth finally gets room to breathe. Mr. Aldwell spoke to Holt in a tone that was courteous and absolute at the same time. In 40 years of business, I have walked away from 3 partnerships. Every time, the reason was the same, not incompetence, but a culture that punishes honesty and protects convenience. I came today to find out whether this company has that problem. Holt opened his mouth. Closed it. "I have my answer," Mr. Aldwell said. "I'll be communicating our position to your board directly." He turned to Risa. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "You had 3 chances to tell the truth. You chose not to. That is the record now." Risa didn't respond. She was crying quietly, not for show, not for sympathy. The private kind of crying that happens when a person finally runs out of ways to justify something to themselves. The HR representatives were writing very quickly. Brenda was looking at Holt with an expression that asked a question she would probably ask him again later, privately, with considerably more force. And Holt was staring at the table like a man carefully counting the cost of every shortcut he had ever taken. I stayed in the room after most people had filed out. The technician packed up his cables. The HR team left with their folders. Risa was escorted out quietly, guided away by Tricia from HR with the particular gentleness reserved for endings. Holt passed me near the door without speaking. He looked older than he had when I walked in. Mr. Aldwell was still seated at the far end of the table. He had not moved to leave. He was waiting. I walked over and sat across from him. "You knew," I said. "From the lobby." "I suspected," he said. "Knowing takes longer." He studied me. "You made it hard to be sure. A man who protects the person hurting him doesn't always do it out of strength. Sometimes it's habit. Sometimes fear. Which did you think it was for me?" "The corridor," he said. "When I told you the kind thing and the right thing aren't always the same. You didn't argue. You didn't agree either. You just thought about it." He folded his hands. "That told me something." He reached into his jacket and placed a card in front of me. A name and number written in blue ink on the back. "Her name is Portia. Talent Development. Tell her I sent you." He stood and headed for the door. "I wasn't testing your skills, Daniel," he said without turning. "I was testing your character. It passed." 3 months later, I walked into a new office. Not Crane and Poole. My own office, a single room with a window and a door that closed, inside the Aldwell Group's operational division. A department Portia had created specifically to rebuild how the company managed its account communications. My name was on a placard by the door. I hired 2 people in my first month, both of them competent and steady and slightly invisible. I knew exactly what that felt like, and I hired them because of it. I built systems with documentation, clear processes, named responsibilities. The kind of structure that made it hard for one person's mistake to quietly become another person's burden. Word reached me, through someone still at Crane and Poole, that Holt was on a performance plan. That the board had ordered a full internal audit after Mr. Aldwell's letter. I didn't follow up. That chapter was closed. On my first Friday, I sat alone after everyone left and looked out the window at the city moving the way cities always do. Forward, indifferent, continuous. I thought about Risa. About the photo on her desk. About 3 emails she started and never sent. I hoped she had found her way to a 4th one. I thought about Mr. Aldwell in the lobby. Patient. Still. While everyone else walked past. The truth doesn't shout. But when it speaks, everything changes. I turned off the light and walked out into the evening as someone who finally knew what they were made of. That was enough.